I have in the house Dr. Abiodun. So we're going to call up Dr. Abiodun right now. And so let me read up Dr. Abiodun's profile. Dr. Abiodun Aji Ajiborode. I'm sorry. I am so sorry if I pronounce the name wrongly. So let me just stick to Dr. Abiodun. Dr. Abiodun is a veteran business leader and marketing strategist with nearly 30 years of experience across top companies like Coca-Cola Nigeria, AB InBev, and Monument Distillers. His experience span strategic marketing, sales leadership, and talent development. He holds a doctorate in business administration alongside degrees from Swiss Business School, Lagos Business School, and Ambrose Ali University. Oh, nice. A chartered marketer in both the UK and Nigeria. Dr. Abiodun has trained at Harvard, Kellogg's, and Cornell. Now CEO of the Brand Management Academy, is a sought-after consultant and speaker known for turning strategy into insights and shaping the next generation of African business leader. I want to welcome on stage Dr. Abiodun. Hi, Dr. Abiodun.
Good morning, Victor. Thank you very much for the amazing work you are doing in the team. And thanks to Marketing Hedge for the opportunity to share with the community of professionals that are currently on this line. Good morning. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Good morning, everyone. While we wait for Victor to join,
Hi.
okay, Victor, you're back.
Yes, technology.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
every one of us have a bit of it today.
I am so sorry about that. Okay, your presentation is not up. I have you uploaded?
It's not up.
No, no, I can't see it.
Okay.
Yeah, now
Is it on full
I can't
screen
see
now?
it. Yes, it is on full screen.
Okay.
Please move to the next slide so that we are sure that it's moving. Yeah, great. Please, thank you,
Awesome.
and I'll leave the floor to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Victor. Morning, everyone, again. Thanks to Marketing Edge for putting this together. And thanks for you all for joining because it will have been very disastrous having a stage and nobody is within the audience. So very challenging speaking after Baba and Dr. Tola was on a steroid before technology. I think maybe the power did what happened. So maybe that still gave me a bit of time or a bit of remnant to talk about because if Tola has finished and then with Baba, I don't think I will have any other thing to add. And we just ask you guys to share the grace and go. However, let me use that privilege of technology to share what I've put together. We are all speaking on the same, storytelling and with data from a perspective of sales and marketing. So you're probably going to be seeing overlapping of concept between myself and what Dr. Tola will be sharing, and perhaps what Lola Marcos will also be sharing. I just want you to take what you think is different in all of us and utilize it in your day-to-day engagement with your brand and your consumers. So I'll be speaking about data usage in sales and marketing. A bit of it has been said, and I'm going to jump this. Now, let me start with a very quick analogy to say in this current dispensation, if you are leading either the sales or the marketing function, or you are perhaps, growing a brand without, recourse to data, you're probably, walking in the dark, your eyes blind, or probably you're walking into a chaos. The years of intuitive marketing has gone. To be honest, David Dimi was the one that said something that in God we trust, everybody bring data. He said that I think about a decade ago, and that statement is still very profound and relevant in today's world, and it's even becoming more relevant because, like Dr. Tola said, data is available. Data is available. The days of we don't have data is gone. We have too much data that sometimes we don't even know what to do with it. And I will tell you today that data is actually the gold in within the ecosystem of business operations. Every function, HR, production, even security, everybody deals with data. Data begins, is the foundation of every decision making in a serious, and I'll put it, the caveat, a serious organization, because there are some organizations as of today are still, depending on intuition alone, or perhaps not even having some, very serious attention to data usage. So data is gold. So if they say consumer is king, I would say data is queen. Because perhaps today you don't know more of the consumers that we have today because of the dynamics of the environment, the changing needs of consumers. And this then poses a very serious challenge for marketeers to actually connect in a very deep way with consumers. So what data does is shape strategy and execution. So data in itself as a way of guiding you through and helping you to navigate the business ecosystem. It throws lights, it guides your thinking. It, in a very serious organization, it kind of suppress your ego because most of the time you see people place their ego over data. What will people think if I take this decision, or I have this is my position all along, and if data prove that position to be wrong, then what will people think about it? So these are some of the things that data has come to do, reshaping the environment and then giving the business world a new life. What are the needs for data? And I think Baba spoke about it when he was doing his opening comments. That literally, data is the foundation for everything that we do today. Helps to optimize your spend from a marketing point of view, provide customers and consumer insights, improve your level of targeting and personalization, help you optimize your resource allocation, enhance your segmented execution, helps you with real life strategy adjustments, things you deploy something and you're seeing the direction in which things are going and you are making adjustments on the go. Data helps you, optimize your strategy, your route to market, your media planning, and all of those things. When you begin to see data, it guides you to take the right decisions. It helps you with performance management. Data helps you to monitor your competitors, and it does more than this. But I just want to capture this as as my focal points. Now, what I want to do this morning is to give a quick framework on what data should be for an organization, how data should be approached, how data should be treated. And that will start from what I think is the fundamental of anyone who is leading any business or managing any brands in today's world. First thing is the what I call data consciousness and literacy. And this is the foundation of it. Building a data first kind of culture in an organization. Today we still have companies that are being led blindly. They don't buy data. Imagine you don't buy retail data, you don't buy brand check data, you don't buy any data, but you want to play in a market that is dynamic, and you're making decisions without a bank of data that is guiding your decision. So the first level of interaction with data is the consciousness of the need for data. The second level is identify which data we're talking about. Dr. Tola mentioned that we have banks of data, and that's very correct. But today is, what do you really need? Because there is a lot of data conspication that we have all around. People just packing all manner of numbers, all manner of images, all manner of charts that has no bearing with what they're doing. So the second is data identification. What data are we looking for? Then the next is the sufficiency of the data. What do you need to make informed decisions? So the sufficiency of the data becomes a kind of skills that need to be on in this current dispensation. Then the next thing is data variety. What is the mix of data that you require for you to take the right decisions? And then you then talk about how do you segment the mix of the data that you have in such a way that it helps you make segmented decisions, and you're not just making a blanket decisions and expecting all consumer to fall in line, where you have diversities amongst consumer. The next thing is, how do you process this data if you get them? How do you interpret them? How do you apply the data? How do you evaluate the data? And lastly, how do you preserve the data? So I'm going to be running through this simple framework, and then helping you to understand how you interact with data in the current marketing and sales world. Now, the first one speaks into data consciousness and literacy. And like I said, it's literally speaking about creating a data first culture within the organization. Data leads the conversation. So it's not about somebody's position, it's not about somebody's ego, it's not about somebody's feeling. It is about what is the data saying. When we understand what the data is saying, then we can then begin to layer upon that what our experiences, our exposure, our worldview are saying about it. But first, the foundation has to be that we are talking from the same input, which is the data bank. And the second thing is then identification of that data. What are the data points that are required? You're building competencies within your organization to understand which data need to be collected. Because today I see forms that, whether digital form or physical forms, that people just throw around. They ask you to fill some forms and just ask, what do you need all this thing for? What do you need all this thing for? Sometimes you go into some activations and you're asking for people's house address. I don't understand. Do you have intention of going to their houses? So the question is, what data is relevant for time? What data is required for the type of decision you want to make, so that you can collect the data and save the consumer some time? Because somebody like me, if you begin to ask me some very useless question, I will drop your phone. Consumer today, their attention span has reduced significantly, that you want to get straight to the point and get what you need from them as quick as possible. So identifying which data is required becomes very, very critical. For instance, if you're in sales, you can't succeed without understanding the retail universe. You need to understand what is the depth and breadth of the retail, consumers that you have. How are those retail segmented? Some people are super, some people are supermarkets, some people are what do you call it, QSR, some people are bookers, some people are, so there are a lot of segmentation within that mix that need to be clear, so that it can guide what data you are collecting. The question, another bit of data that you need to actually think about is the consumer themselves. What channel do they use? What type of channel? What category of brands or services do they engage in? So you want to understand the performance within that category. You want to understand the regional performance. You want to understand the pricing movement. What is happening within the pricing ecosystem? What are competitors doing? What is the margin split? So those kind of things, and the sales promotional data, those are kind of things are the one that helps you to make informed decision in managing sales function. From a marketing point of view, if you give me 1 second, please. Sorry about that. Sometimes movement can distort your thinking, so I need to shut my door. So from a marketing point of view, you want to understand consumer description. For instance, when you use ethnographic to actually expand your knowledge about consumer, like their lifestyle, their belief systems, and all of those things. You want to understand the purchase pattern of a consumer. So you need data in that space to understand how often does this person buy this particular product or service, so that it helps you to start having your plan of engaging. The channel preference, do they like to buy in the modern trade, in the general trade, on digital platform? What SKU is their preference? What is their preferred media consumption pattern? Instagram, Facebook, TikToks and the likes. How do they engage with content? What content interests them? Sport, fashion, music, games, or what? Gossip. So you need this data to help you in your engagement with them. So when you talk about the type of data or data identifications, they are very key. Like you said, data available, but the question is, what data do you need? What type of data? To what degree? What is the span and the scope of that data that you require? So these are very, very instructive to guide our data gathering. The next thing is the data sufficiency. How much data is required? So you don't get into data conspication in a way in which you just have pools or piles of data, Excel data that sometimes you don't even know what to do with them. So the question is, what are the key data points that you require for the right decision making? How far should you go? What do I want to do with 10 years data? In today's world, you say, well, give me your 10-year sales data. To do what? In a dynamic year that 2014 and 2024 is different from 2025 significantly. And the world has shifted significantly. In 10 years before, 10, 15 years ago that I'm looking for data, probably the China ecosystem is only focusing on modern or maybe general trades. What do I need that for? The question is, what's the recency of the data point that I require to make the right decision so that I can capture consumer of today? So sometimes you need to understand where is the band. And that is why you see people, a lot of smart organizations don't go beyond 5 years, because you know that the dynamics of the environment changes faster. So 5 years becomes your gauge for what do you call it, for recency. So understanding the data sufficiency is very, very crucial. At what point do you cut the cord? At what point do you say this is enough? I think I can get the fact and the insight that are required to make the right decision within this pocket. So it's important that we also do that. Now, another big point of this framework is the diversity of the data. How diverse should data be to help you actually remove several biases that could come up? If, for instance, I want to launch a brand that speaks to what do you call it, maybe Gen Zs, for the sake of argument, the question then becomes, the Gen Zs that you just call has different legs. Because if you begin to profile them, Gen Z in a religion space is different from the one that probably in the tech world and all of that. So the question is, what is the diversity that is required in the data that you need to make the right decision? So you need to think about that. How do you then segment this data, having collected them and map them into different pillars that help you take the right decision? Because today, consumer marketers are gravitating significantly towards segmented execution, segmented marketing, segmented communication, that it is not just one communication you spread across all the channels, all the regions. That's why we don't get impact. The real impact is for you to be able to understand one consumer at a time, or a segment of a consumer at a time, and speak to that consumer in the language they can understand so that they can engage with your brand. So how do you segment that? And the next thing is processing this data becomes very, very important. Yes, I'm asking for Nielsen data. I'm asking for Ipsos. I'm asking for, Kantar. They've now sent everything. Do you understand what to do with it? So this is another skills to understand, how do I process this data point? How do I draw correlation within these data points? How do I triangulate this data such that I am not missing a point? What a quant data will give you will be different from what a qual data will give you. And you need both of them to make an informed decision. So they are very crucial for you to get a clarity of, how do I dissect this data point so that I can get the right insight, so that my decisions are guided. They are product of thought through process of data mining. Sometimes you also, as a marketer, you know where you're going, and this is where the insight pathway comes to play, where I know what I want to see. Then I begin to look at the data from that lens, without being biased of if I see something else. But at the end of the day, there's something I want to deal with, which is probably a business issue I want to resolve. And I'm looking at the pool of data points to see, how do I use this data to sort of extract insight that help me resolve this business problem or challenges, as the case may be. So it's important that these skills are also learned. They are also learned. The next thing is, then when you analyze this data, how do you interpret it? Crafting meaning and the storytelling out of your understanding of deep knowledge of this data becomes something that today's marketeers and sales leaders must embrace. Now that the data has been analyzed, it's been dissected, you have spoken to the data in the language that the data understand, and you are able to extract the fact out of it. The question is, how do you interpret the data? Because the interpretation of the data is now subject to your worldview, to your experience, to the resource that is available to you, to a lot of factors that are not probably linked directly to the data itself. So you need to now start thinking about the business, thinking about your value chain, thinking about every other context around it for you to actually situate the interpretation of the data, of the insight, into that context, so that it helps you to actually navigate without just walking blind. Okay, I have an insight, so what? Your insight will live within a context. The contextual adaptation of your insight is what gives you the impact. And when you talk about analysis of data, there are three things I often look at. One, the behavior of the data. How is the data behaving? Up, down? Is he stable, unstable? What is the trend over a period of time? So you're not taking one data point and then using that as a judgment. How can you see that for a period of time? And what is the pattern of the data? Then you're talking about the depth of the data from a macro point of view, micro and nano point of view. And more importantly, what purpose is the data showing? Either directing, either presenting an opportunity, or probably warning you. Now, how do you then apply the data when you are clear? You're now clear about the insight, you're clear about the interpretation. How do you then apply it? And a lot of time when you talk about application of insight, it speaks to implementing what you've extracted from the pool of data and bringing it into the operational, dynamics of the business. How do you do that? There are 4 levels of application of data. And most of the time when people come to my school for lectures, I used to tell them, why you don't get respect from your leaders is because you are probably operating at the lowest level of application of data. And the lowest level of application of data is what we call the reporting data, because it looks at data from two dimensions. One, complexity and the value that the data itself brings to the business. The complexity of the data, the sufficiency of the data, and speaks into the value that is bringing. So the lowest value is the reporting data. When you get that data and you just report it as it is the lowest value creation, because all you are just telling us is a sung event. What has happened? It has no value. When you talk about senior leaders, it's good that you've told us what has happened, but we are more interested in why did it happen? Why did it happen? And that is when you have gone beyond just reporting the data as it is, by delving into the data to analyze that data, to say this is why this thing happened, which is also good, but it's still very, very, at the lower part of the data appreciation itself. And the next thing is, what is currently happening? What is currently happening? Because it helps us in our decision making, because currently means that something is being monitored, and then we are having a clarity of what has happened, why it happened, and what is currently happening. But the highest level of data application that business leaders do appreciate is when you get into predictive data. When you begin to say what might happen based on what we are monitoring. And we also have, the first two levels speaks about evaluative mode, which is past. But more importantly, you have the present situation and updating, and then you have the somewhat predicting into the future to say this is what will happen. And these are all function of you romancing the data and using the data within the contextual business operating arena. And more recently, it's been added that the data might predict what will happen, which is great. But more very, very, that you see what AIs and the tools that are emerging have done is now helping you and directing you to say, this is actually what you should be doing. This is actually what you should be doing based on what will happen. And that is where we call prescriptive data. And that is where the strategy comes to play in your understanding of data and the application of it. The next thing on that framework is data evaluation. And that speaks into what are the framework that you're, or structure that you're going to put in place to actually see whether the data that you've extracted and the insight that you've gotten from the data actually worked. And this is where evaluation comes to play. And that's where you see people doing a lot of, performance measurement, performance marketing, measuring the efficacy of their decision that is based on, or that was based on the decision, or that was based on the insight extracted from the data. And that is very, very crucial. And the last thing is what we call data presentation, or preservation, rather. Preservation then means, how do we archive the data? How do you collate the data? Where do you put the data? How do you put governance around the data? How do you tokenize the data? Tokenization speaks into how you want to codify the data such that even if somebody takes the data in itself, he can't understand it until you let the person understand that what AYCZ means is this. You have tokenized that data. So that even everybody sees that data, they don't understand it until you give them the interpretation of the coded token. So this is how you then begin to preserve data for future usage or to give you competitive advantage. Because today, data is good, but that data in the hands of a wrong employee, if you don't codify it or you don't do governance around it, expose you like, like if you are, I don't know, just gives you out like that. If you don't codify your data, you don't store them, you don't preserve them in a way that it keeps your competitive advantage to you. So, as I round up, I would say data speaks. Data, or a set of data, or a bank of it, speaks when you interrogate data. Most of the time, all those data that you see are dumb. It's the interrogation of the data that gets them to start speaking, and that is what we call insight. But my bigger question today is, are we listening to what the data is saying? And more importantly, are we obeying, or we allow our ego, we allow what my manager will say, we allow to please my manager, to please the board of director, to please my director? Do we allow that to overshadow what the data is saying? That's a question I want to leave you with as I close. Thank you very much. I'll take your questions or comments.
Thank you. Hi, thank you so much, Dr. Abiodun. That was very insightful. Thank you very very much. For me, there were key takeouts. I had a whole lot to write on my jotter, but I'll just mention one or two. The first thing you mentioned was the fact that as marketer, we need to be data conscious. There's the need for data consciousness and literacy. Not just for the guys who handle the data, for everybody within the team to be able to make an informed decision. And again, as a brand, you should invest in the right kind of data for your brand. You should buy the type of data that is needed to be able to make an informed decision and be able to drive your sales and marketing efforts. That is very, very important. And the framework that you gave, fantastic. Then you also mentioned the lowest level of data being the reporting data. It's funny how sometimes we have conversation with brands. I was having a conversation with a marketing manager recently, and he was complaining about the reports. And I'm like, look, it's not just about the reports, right? Because they were just focused on, just give me the report and let me know what my social media is. Look, it's not just about what your social media is doing, what the sentiment is. Anybody can generate that data and give to you, and you're looking at the data, but there's no insight from it. There's no actionable. There's nothing to say, okay, you know what, based on what we've learned from this is the action that we need to take immediately to be able to drive sales and push our marketing further. And that's very, 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 very key, right? But I have a question here for you, though, from our conversation. So you mentioned that business needs to begin to look at how they apply data in the thing that they do, and looking at the business application of data map that you share, right? Where would you say most of the businesses in Nigeria, especially, where would you categorize them? And how can you advise that for those who are not at the description level yet? What are the things that they need to do immediately to be able to get them to that point where they are not only having access to the right kind of data that they need, but they are actually utilizing the data to the fullest?
Okay. Thanks very much, Victor, for the question. Of course, when you look at that two by two grid, you're talking about the complexity of the data and the value to the business. Where people should be in this dispensation should be at the prescriptive level for any business that is serious. I, I stopped doing 9 to 5, I think about 3 years ago. And I think my baptism into the dynamic data movement was during COVID. And during COVID, sometimes I did about 8 different iterations of strategy because things are moving like the speed of light. And that was the part of AI, and that was part of this generative index that you've seen all around. And it makes it extremely very difficult for marketers today to perform excellently. I think we enjoyed a bit because within some of us they started, we didn't have a lot of data, but even now with the data that you have, a lot of things are moving quickly.
True.
They are moving quickly, so the data are becoming outdated almost on a steady mode. So the question for a business today is to become, a bit more swift at converting data or converting insight into profit. That's what I would say. Because new insights are emerging, new things are coming. Catch on the one you have now. So the speed of response to data implementation becomes very critical. So when you get the data, as fresh as the data is, extract it, implement it like now. It's nothing like, you are doing analysis paralysis, waiting for 2 months, 3 months to take decision on something. Consumer life has moved significantly within that period of time. And that is what kills a lot of companies. We knew the story of Nokia. Now they are trying to struggle to come back to the market with all manner of things, but you've lost it. You don't want to give room for competition to take the stage before you start coming to chase them. It's going to be very difficult. Nobody takes power and want to leave power. We know the story of African presidencies and all of that. So the same thing in the same thing in the consumer world, that when you have data, the speed of interpretation of that data becomes very, very important. One. The second thing, which I've mentioned before, is you must, and I remember, and I work with some great companies. Coca-Cola is one of them, and I will give it to them all the time. They might not be perfect, but there are budgets for data buying. As a matter of fact, you will be sacked if you don't buy some data. Don't save money. Don't save money for us. Don't say you are doing cost cutting when it comes to data. No cost cutting. Something else will give way for us to buy the data. So I remember, as far back in my days in Coca-Cola, you have budget close to almost 200 million, 300, 500, I don't even know, in billions. And I'm talking about business to buy data. Data becomes very, very critical. So for me, it is one, investing in data purchase. Two, developing competence that helps you interpret the insight extract and interpret the insight from the data and apply it almost immediately. That is the only framework that can help you capture value from data and get you into that level that you're actually taking advantage of your competitors. There's no point having data and the data sit in a data bar for 6 months, then you come back to it, and then the market has moved on before then. That's what I would say, Victor.
Thank you very much. You had it here first. There's no point sitting on the data that you've gathered over 6 months and not taking action with it. Let me go to my comment section. I have a very vibrant participant in the room this morning, and the comment has been buzzing. Like it's Sandra said that's a great delivery. Thank you, Sandra, for joining us this morning. That was amazing. It's nice having you on board with us. Amos said because human beings will always be a data collection, analysis, interpretation, susceptible to being skewed towards a predetermined end. Oh, okay, that's a question actually. Okay, because again, he said because of who human beings are and will always be. Are data collection, analysis, interpretation, and application, etc., susceptible to being skewed towards a predetermined end? Let me put, I don't know if you got a question or let me put it in. We've had a situation where you have marketing guys says, oh, as a data collector, go and help me collect this data, analyze the data, and tell me what you think. And you're coming back and say, oh, this is what we think. I'm like, no. That's not what I have in mind. This is what you should be telling me, right? So he's asking, is it possible that data are skewed to the point that to achieve a predetermined end?
So I'll answer it in two ways. Thanks for that question, Amos. I'll answer it in two ways. The first one is, and this is the difference between market research and consumer insights. So this was a long debate in my last class. So when you have a business issue that you want to resolve, you have a business issue that you want to resolve, the question is, you are asking specific questions in the market to get insight towards the resolvement of that particular business issue. So you can commission a research to say, I want to deal with this XYZ as a business. And I want to check the markets whether they are aligned with what I want to do. So it's a different conversation. When you talk about consumer insight, it is now saying, I don't know. I know some things are happening in the markets. I just want to understand why they are happening in the market. That's in itself flip your expectation, because it then means you have no clue. You already have a blind sight that you're looking illumination into. So whatsoever comes become gospel to you. But in an attempt to say, I want to go into the markets with XYZ SKU, with this and that. So I'm commissioning a research to say, go into the market and let me find out whether these people will ask this thing. At the end of the day, they might come out to say, oh, perhaps I won't like vanilla flavor. The question is, if you are able to look at the segment of that report that is saying, I won't like vanilla flavor, and you say, oh, how many people are saying I would like vanilla flavor? And then as a business, you decide to say, hey, perhaps should we then go with this small niche of people who literally will adopt our vanilla flavor and forget about those who are saying they will not? Because let me tell you, you will never have, there's no report that you ever have, you have 100% acceptance to whatsoever you're looking for. So the question is 20%, 30% enough for you to make a business judgment? The question then for you as a business leader is to say, I'm taking position and I'm sticking to this position. So there are instances in which report comes into you and you modulate that report because you already have a business agenda. But there are other instances in which you are clouded. You don't know what is in the market. You want to understand. At that point, whatsoever comes to you becomes your compass. You don't have anything to say within that place because this then begins to guide you. But not like, okay, you already have emotion. Let me give you a classic example. If I have a line, I have a production line that can produce only 400 grams. I get what I'm saying. I'm going to be commissioning a research to know the acceptance level to 400 grams. Even if people are saying that, oh, 250 grams, I would like, it gives me opportunity for my innovation pipeline. But that doesn't say that I'm going to shut down the 400-gram line. I'm going to be going to import 250-gram line, wait for another 6 months for it to come, implement, establish it, and then take another 1 year before I launch 250. No, I won't do that as a business. I'm going to look at how many people are willing to buy my 400-gram now. Remember, I already have a machine that can produce 400 grams. If that is a sufficient number for me, I will take a call, introduce my 400 grams, capture that market while I'm looking for the machine to do the 250 grams. That's the way in which you can have a predetermined approach to data collection, or you want a blanket approach to understand what the consumer will need. That's how I will answer it.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going back to our comment section again. Taiwo said data. Okay, Taiwo, from data from information to knowledge and finally to wisdom. Thank you, Taiwo, for your comment. I have another question here. Okay, it's a comment from Cosmos. With high marketing budgets, okay, this is a question. So she's asking, with high marketing budgets, how do you win the bots buy-in to accept the outcome of data?
With high marketing budget, how do you win the bot to accept the outcome of the data? Number one, remember what I said. The first thing is, if you don't build an organization in which data is the CEO of the organization, then you have a problem. If your CEO is bigger than the data, then you have a significant problem in your hand. For example, your board doesn't believe in data. That's why we say the first thing to do, the first mountain to conquer is actually to build that data literacy, such that everybody, from the chairman of the board into the CEO, into all the function heads, respect data. And data becomes the god. So when you have that, you don't need to lobby anybody. You don't need to beg the board to accept the report, to accept the outcome of the data. The bottom line is that everybody believes in data, and we have, subject all our egos, all our experiences, every other thing into what the data has saying. So when you have that, then you don't have anything. For instance, I've worked in some company in which whatever the data says, whether you believe that or not, if you are going to change anything that the data is saying, as long, and this is what is important, guy. That is why don't gather data from some useless, very, very, untrusted, very, very invalid, places. So that when you put your trust in it, you are putting on trust in something that is valid, and not just some people sitting in one corner cooking something for you. So if you do that, then you can put yourself to say, this is the truth. And if your board of director will take a different position, you will have been what? Vindicated if anything happened thereafter. And even in some instances, you see companies saying you have to sign a bond. We are signing a bond as a board to change what the data are saying. That's how serious it is in some companies. Because to be honest, there are instances in which we have seen data, but we have seen decisions that have been taken out of gut feel, out of this intuition, out of this, and that worked very well and nullify what the data was saying. To be honest, I've seen it in my experience. But the question is, in a data-driven environment, if you must do that, then there must be people putting pen to paper and signing in blood that we all decided to go against the direction of the data. So that's first thing, is to build that consciousness and the culture of data respect. If that is done, you don't need to manage anybody. That's how I would say it, Victor.
Hi, Dr. Abiodun. Thank you so much. I have one last question for you, and we'll move on this morning. So I have a question from Felicia. She's asking, with the constant change in consumer behavior and purchasing power, will there still be need to use stored data? I think you answered this question before. Maybe you just throw more light into it.
So if you check when I was telling you about data interpretation, I was telling you about the trend. Now, stored data helps you to understand the history, because sometimes when you don't understand the history and you don't understand the pattern of occurrence, then the recency of a data can be very deceptive. So the question is, storing data, you need to have a cutoff to say the data that we are keeping is not just more than 5 years data. And that is where the recency governance comes to play. But you still need data in the past to help you interpret what the future will look like, for sure. For sure. So you can't say, I wake up today, I'll take fresh data today, like fresh juice, and that is what I'm working on. It might be misleading, because a lot of things are governed by biases, by market effect and every other thing. So that's why you need, okay, what is the pattern of occurrence of this particular entity over a period of time? Then that can actually tell you to say, okay, this is stable, or this is something that you can count on. That's what I would say. That's why till tomorrow you still need to archive some data, but the number of days, hours, years that you archive, that is different from one company to the other, and is a function of what recency governance guiding your business. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abiodun. It was really nice having you here this morning, and we say a very big thank you for joining us
Thank you
this
very much.
morning. Thank you. Thank you.